Title: He Said I Belonged Backstage, so I took the whole damn spotlight without ever stepping on stage. I remember the exact moment my uncle's words carved a scar I didn't even know I was still capable of feeling. It was at the Greene family's annual gala, a pretentious, overpriced parade of self-congratulations masked as a charity event. Picture velvet ropes, champagne towers, and spotlights so blinding you'd think heaven itself had RSVP'd. I'm Lena Marsh. I'm 36, a single mom, and the family's permanent embarrassment ever since I divorced their golden boy, Brandon Greene, 5 years ago. My son Caleb, 17 years old, sharp as a razor, and invisible to the people who share his last name. I worked that night, not as a guest, but as a stagehand. Ironic, right? The Greene name in lights above the venue, and me in black backstage, taping down cables and adjusting rigging to make sure their precious evening of brilliance didn't literally burn the place down. That's when I heard it. Victor Greene, Brandon's father, the king of this hollow empire, lifted his whiskey glass under the main spotlight and said loud enough for the board members to hear, "Why waste a spotlight on someone who belongs backstage?" I froze. My hands still smelled like duct tape and metal polish. Caleb stood beside me, wearing his faded hoodie like armor. He wasn't even supposed to be there, but he'd begged me to let him help backstage, to stay close. He didn't react, not a flinch. Just stared at the floor like the scuff marks on the marble mattered more than the fact his own grandfather had dismissed him like a stage prop. I should have stormed out there, ripped that stupid mic from Victor's hand, and told the whole glittering room what it really looked like behind their perfect curtains. But I didn't. Because in this family, truth doesn't win. Control does. And Victor Greene controlled the narrative, the spotlights, and apparently even who deserved to exist in their glow. What he didn't know, what none of them knew, is that Caleb hadn't come to fade into the background. Hidden in his backpack was something he'd spent the last year building from scraps, cheap circuit boards, and salvaged theater lights. A project no one in that family ever asked about, cared about, or believed he was capable of. And as the final act of the night approached, as the grand reveal of Victor's latest overhyped stage technology prepared to steal the evening, my son zipped up his hoodie, slung that backpack over his shoulder, and whispered in my ear, "It's showtime, Mom, but not theirs." And that's when I realized Caleb wasn't just going to take back the night. He was about to rewrite the entire story. They always say you can't steal the spotlight if you're not standing in it. But that night, my son proved them wrong. Caleb moved through that place like he belonged to the shadows. Confident. Focused. I tried to keep up, but something about him felt untouchable. Like I was watching him step into a version of himself even I hadn't fully met yet. The grand finale was minutes away. Victor Greene stood backstage rehearsing his closing speech, flanked by his army of PR people and engineers, all barking orders like they were launching a rocket, not flipping a few overpriced light switches. I saw it then, how it had always been. Power in that family wasn't earned. It was performed. Smiles stretched too wide, applause on demand, all smoke and mirrors. And for 17 years, my son had been left choking behind that curtain. But not tonight. Caleb found the main control hub, hidden behind a velvet-draped partition, and with hands steady as stone, he pulled a small device from his backpack. It looked like nothing special, just a mess of wires and a cracked touchscreen held together by tape and sheer willpower. "You're sure about this?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. He didn't even look up. "They want a show, Mom. I'm just giving them one they won't forget." And before I could say another word, the house lights went down. The entire auditorium, packed with CEOs, influencers, city officials, plunged into blackness. A beat of confusion, then a low murmur of panic. I could hear Victor's voice somewhere off stage, sharp and irritated, asking why his revolutionary light system wasn't firing. And then a soft pulse of light bloomed from the back of the room, not from the main stage, not from Victor's precious system, from a dozen small devices tucked under chairs, hidden behind speakers, suspended discreetly above the audience. Caleb's lights. But these weren't just lights. They moved, fluid and alive. Patterns unfolded across the ceiling like a living canvas. Waves of color, constellations forming and dissolving. A heartbeat of light that seemed to sync with every single breath in that silent, awestruck room. And then, it happened. The patterns shifted into something unmistakable. A name. Designed by CM, projected right above Victor Greene's head. You could feel the air get sucked out of the room. The same man who just bragged about his billion-dollar tech couldn't even lift his head. And when he did, his eyes locked with mine. Just for a second. Before snapping toward the far aisle where Caleb stood. Calm, his hood down now, watching his own masterpiece unfold. The same boy they said belonged backstage had just taken over the entire goddamn show, without ever stepping on stage. And here's the part that hit the hardest. Caleb wasn't smiling. He wasn't gloating. He stood there with the kind of quiet satisfaction that only comes when you've spent your whole life being unseen, and you finally make people look. I didn't cry. Not yet. But I swear to you, in that moment, every ounce of grief, every humiliation I swallowed in silence for years, it all felt like it had a purpose. Victor Greene stumbled through a half-hearted attempt to recover. The planned speech? Forgotten. The tech demo? Dead. And as the lights dimmed and the final ripple of color faded from the ceiling, Caleb turned to me and said, "Let's go, Mom. My part's over. They can keep the stage." I followed him out the side door, my legs shaking, my heart thudding so loud it felt like a drumline in my chest. But just as we stepped into the cool night air, I heard someone call out behind us. "Victor." His voice wasn't loud this time. "Caleb, wait." And for the first time in his life, my son didn't stop. He kept walking. But me? I turned to see the unthinkable. Victor Greene, the man who never once bent, never once admitted fault, standing there, empty-handed, and whispering to no one in particular, "That boy, he built something I can't even buy." They say people remember the grand finales, but I think it's the quiet moments right before everything collapses that haunt you most. After that night, after Caleb's silent mic drop and Victor Greene's stunned whisper, I thought it was over. I thought my son had claimed his victory and we'd finally walk free from that family shadow. But it's never that simple, is it? 3 days later, a letter showed up at our apartment. Thick cream cardstock. The Greene family crest embossed like a damn royal decree. I stared at it for a long time before opening it. Inside, an invitation. Not an apology. Not an acknowledgement. An invitation to join a private meeting of family stakeholders to discuss the future of green technologies. Stakeholders. That's what they called us now. Not family, not blood, just stakeholders. I wanted to tear it up, burn it. But Caleb? He just looked at it and said, "Let's see what their future looks like, Mom." So we went. The meeting was held at Victor's private estate, Greene Manor, the place I swore I'd never set foot in again. Gilded gates, white stone pillars, the kind of place that smells like expensive regret. The conference room was packed. Every self-important member of the Greene clan seated around a polished oak table big enough to land a plane on. And right at the head sat Victor, looking every bit the fallen king trying to salvage his crumbling empire. Caleb and I took seats at the far end, and for a full minute, no one said a word. Then, Victor cleared his throat. Effective immediately, we are expanding the company's innovation department, and I'd like to formally offer Caleb the role of lead technical consultant. I swear, my heart stopped. The boy they dismissed, ignored, humiliated, now they wanted to parade him around as the next face of their empire. Caleb leaned back in his chair, completely unfazed, and asked in the calmest voice I've ever heard, "What's the salary?" Victor's lips tightened. "It's not about money, son. It's about legacy." Caleb nodded slowly, then looked around the table. "Legacy? Is that what you call pretending I didn't exist for 17 years? You could have heard a pin drop. Then, just as Victor opened his mouth to spin some grand, empty speech, Caleb pulled something out of his jacket and slid it across the table. A small black flash drive. "You want my future? It's right there," he said. "My designs, my system. The one you tried to take credit for after the gala." Victor's face drained of color. Because here's the twist. Caleb had already patented his technology, under his own name. No corporation, no family ties. And that drive? It contained every prototype schematic, every line of code, registered, protected, and already sold. Not to Greene Technologies, but to their biggest competitor. I swear to you, for a moment, I thought Victor might actually faint. His hands shook as he reached for the drive like it might save him from drowning. But Caleb stood, pulled me up with him, and said one last thing before we left that mansion for good. "You can keep your legacy, grandfather. I'm building something better without you." And just like that, we walked out. No looking back. That drive? It was just a symbol. Caleb's real victory was something Victor couldn't touch. His freedom. And as we stood in the driveway, the fall air cutting sharp and clean, I realized something. This wasn't just my son's victory. It was mine too. Because for the first time in years, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel invisible. I felt enough. And if you're reading this, sitting somewhere with your own stack of regrets and people who've made you feel like a footnote in their shiny stories, please hear me when I say this. You don't need their seat at the table. You can build your own. And when you do, God, it's worth everything. They say revenge is a dish best served cold. But I don't think that's true. The real kind, the kind that changes you, doesn't come frozen or flaming hot. It comes precise, measured, like a scalpel, not a sledgehammer. And that's exactly how Caleb moved after that boardroom humiliation. He didn't yell. He didn't throw accusations. He planned. For weeks, he spent every free hour refining his designs. But here's the part no one saw coming. He wasn't working alone. Remember those invisible people who'd spent their lives in the Greene family's shadow? The technicians, the engineers, the stagehands? Yeah, turns out Caleb had been building more than circuits all these years. He'd been building loyalty. The people the Greenes looked down on? They believed in him. They backed him. And when he called, they answered. One by one, they started walking away from Greene Technologies. Quietly, no drama, just gone. And every single one of them took something with them. Knowledge, experience, and in some cases, the real innovation the Greenes had been claiming as their own. By the time Victor Greene realized what was happening, his so-called innovation department was nothing more than a hollow shell. But Caleb wasn't done. See, while Victor spent his days trying to patch the sinking ship, Caleb had already partnered with a new investor. Someone with deep pockets and zero interest in playing by the old rules. And here's where it gets good. They planned a product launch, same day, same time, as the Greene family's annual tech expo. Only this time, the Greene name wouldn't be the one lighting up the headlines. The night of the expo, Victor stood on stage in front of a half-empty auditorium, his face pale, his voice cracking through a mic that kept glitching, because of course the last few qualified engineers had left weeks ago. Meanwhile, across town, in a converted warehouse packed wall-to-wall with people, Caleb took the stage. No spotlight, no fireworks, just him. And when he revealed his latest prototype, a modular lighting system small enough to fit in your palm, powerful enough to illuminate an entire stadium, the crowd lost its mind. But the real twist? The system was open source. He wasn't selling it to the highest bidder. He was giving it to the world. No patents, no gatekeeping, no billion-dollar licensing fees. Just pure disruptive innovation, out in the open for anyone smart and brave enough to build upon. Victor Greene's empire wasn't just crumbling, it was obsolete. And as Caleb walked off stage that night, reporters swarming him, engineers and dreamers lining up just to shake his hand, he paused at the door, turned to me and said, "Mom, This, this is the legacy I want. Not just for me, for everyone they told would never be enough. I couldn't even speak, because for the first time in my life, I wasn't just proud. I was free. And if you've ever sat quietly in the back of the room waiting for someone to see you, if you've ever swallowed your voice because they told you it wasn't the right time, or you weren't the right person, please hear me. You don't have to fight for a seat at their table. You can build a better one. And trust me, when you do, they'll never forget the day they realize they can't sit with you. I used to think the loudest moment in a person's life was when they finally screamed back at the people who tried to silence them. But I was wrong. The loudest moment is when you don't need to scream at all. 3 months after Caleb's open source launch turned the entire industry on its head, Victor Greene's empire collapsed under the weight of its own arrogance. It started quietly. Contracts canceled, investors pulled out. Then came the lawsuits. Turns out, when you build a legacy on stolen ideas and silenced voices, those skeletons don't stay buried forever. By the time the media caught wind of the internal corruption, the Greene name wasn't just tarnished. It was radioactive. And the final blow? The Department of Justice announced a formal investigation into corporate fraud and intellectual property theft, cases spanning decades. I remember watching the news as Victor Greene, the man who once stood 10 feet tall behind every podium, was let out of his own building in handcuffs. Not for the cameras, not some dramatic scene, but real. Quiet. Devastating. And that's when it hit me. This wasn't just a downfall. It was a reckoning. I stood next to Caleb that day as the world finally saw the truth. His name wasn't just a footnote anymore. It was the headline. But even then, he didn't celebrate. He just looked at me and said, "Justice isn't loud, Mom. It's permanent." That night, we sat on the same cracked porch, where I used to wonder if life would ever feel like more than survival. This time it did. It felt like peace. And if you're wondering whether Victor ever apologized, he didn't. But you know what? Some debts don't get paid in words. They get paid in silence, in the empty rooms of once crowded board meetings, in the moments when a man realizes too late that his name means nothing and his power is just a memory no one cares to remember. That's how real justice feels. It doesn't scream. It leaves echoes. And sometimes, the sweetest sound you'll ever hear is their silence. The lesson I learned? Closure doesn't always come wrapped in apologies. Sometimes it arrives quietly, when you finally walk away and don't look back. If you've ever lived a version of this story, if you're still waiting for someone to say what they should have years ago, drop your story in the comments. I'll be there reading. And if you're like me, still finding your voice one hard-earned breath at a time, stick around. You're exactly where you need to be.